What words do I use this night? You know, I started with the words that closed last night with the words of Psalm 22. But as we come to this point in our year that is so critical to who we are as Christians, what stories do I tell? What wisdom do I have that doesn't try to remove the scandal that the world may be foolish? And yet, it may be foolish by the world standards, but this is God's wisdom that makes human wisdom foolish, as Paul could say. I could simply remain silent, let the texts speak for themselves, and perhaps I should. I've done that before. But as I was coming to this night, it seems like after 2 decades I should have something to say about this. 2 decades where between education and being a pastor, I should have some words to say. Some wisdom that helps give shape and form to these words that are spoken from the cross. So perhaps before I yield to the words that we're going to hear in just a few minutes as we walk through the last 7 words that Jesus speaks from the cross, perhaps I can share some wisdom that may be able to help us hear these words, to bear their weight, and to know the love that they are spoken from. So 501 years ago, there was an Augustinian monk who was at that time relatively unknown. And he was thinking about how to articulate this gracious God that he discovered by going back to the Scriptures. And so he's talking for the first time in 1518 to a group of fellow brothers, fellow Augustinian monks in his order, about this contrast between the theology of much of his time, which he called theology of glory, a theology that focused on God kind of in these abstracts. You know, God was all-powerful, and yet the more they talked about God, the less you could really pin down what they meant. And for Luther, God was really come to know God in Christ Jesus, and particularly in this experience of the cross. So that's where he came up with this terminology of the theology of the cross. That where it seems like God's love is most absent. This is where we find out what God's love is all about. We know only about this experience of the love of God because of Christ. And, you know, as St. Paul can say, you know, this is kind of the center of where in Philippians 2, 5-11, you know, Christ who was in the form of God, didn't regard equality with God as something to be exploited. Instead, he sets it aside and empties himself. He takes on our human form and he becomes one of us. And in that love, he embraces our suffering. He embraces the possibility of being rejected by us. You know, Christ is the one who loves us even when we, like sheep, have gone astray, to use Isaiah's language. Luther would talk about it this way. So these are Luther's words. The love of God which lives in man loves sinners and evil persons and fools and weaklings in order to make them righteous, good, wise, and strong. Rather than seeking its own good, the love of God flows forth and bestows good. Therefore, sinners are attracted because they are loved. They are not loved because they are attracted. This is the love of the cross, born of the cross, which turns in the direction where it does not find good where it may enjoy, but where it may confer good on bad and needy person. So, Luther likes to talk about this in terms of a divine exchange. So, if you remember the parable of the prodigal son, you know, it's like the father going out and wrapping the son in a new robe and putting a ring on his finger and throwing a feast to welcome them home. Luther used the language of the divine exchange in terms of a wedding. So, the bride of Christ comes unworthy and shameful, and Luther, you know, has this image of Christ putting the ring on bride of Christ's finger, the church, and taking and placing His name upon it, placing His honor upon it. You know, we just heard in Isaiah one of the suffering servant pieces. You know, and I love these words from Isaiah. They're a little hard sometimes to hear. But there's a reason that the church has heard these words referring to Christ for a long time. So as Isaiah said, He had no form or majesty that we should look at Him, nothing in His appearance that we should desire Him. He was despised and rejected by others, a man of suffering, and acquainted with infirmity. And as one who from others hid their faces, and He was despised, and we held Him of no account. Surely He has borne our infirmities and carried our diseases, and yet we accounted Him stricken, struck down by God and afflicted. But He was wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. Upon Him the punishment that made us whole, and by His bruises we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray, and we have all turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on Him the iniquity of us all. Christ is the one who enters into the space of God-forsakenness and brings the love into that space. You know, and this is the love of God that nothing can separate us from. The early Christians used numerous ways to try and talk about what happens at the cross and in the resurrection. They used, for example, they would say it's a victory over sin, death, and the devil. They would use the language of the marketplace and say, you know, this is the redemption, or you're purchasing a captive people. They would use the language of peacemaking. This is a reconciliation between God and people. They would use the language of the courtroom and the language of justification, where, you know, you've made a person not guilty anymore. You've made a person just or right. He uses the language of making a person holy, of sanctifying them, of anointing them as God's beloved people. And there are many more, but ultimately it all comes back to love. God's love for the world. God's love for the people of this world. And God's love for you and for me. Christ, the love of God, will be rejected and sentenced to be crucified. And we will hear Jesus enter into this paradox of a God-forsaken place where the love of God is present. We will hear forgiveness pleading for those who are unforgiven. We will see a bandit made into one who can enter into the kingdom of heaven. We will see a thirsty one invite the world to the banquet of the kingdom of heaven. And even though we will hear at the very end the words that it is finished, we know that as we approach the empty tomb, where this is just a new beginning. And now we hear the words of the cross. As those who, in light of Christ's actions, have been set free. We are those who have been made holy by Christ's holiness. We are those who have been made attractive because God loved us. We have been set free and made into a new creation by God's act of forgiveness and love this night. This night we walk into the darkness because Christ has led us to the light. And we trust that the light of God shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. Thanks be to God.